I'm from StampWithLorraine.com, and welcome to a tutorial today on embossing. Now we know that Stampin' Up! Has a lot of different embossing folders that can be used in many different ways. I'm going to show you a neat way to use them today. We know that, of course, you can emboss a background layer to your card that gives that nice texture around the whole layer. But what if you don't want it on the whole layer? What if you just want a piece of it, something like this, where only a strip of it is, or even less, maybe just a very thin strip is embossed? Well, I'm going to show you how to do that today. So stay tuned, and if you like this tutorial, please give me a thumbs up down below. And if you don't have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, I'd love to be yours. And you can visit my blog and sign up for my mailing list there. Meanwhile, I hope you try this great embossing technique because it really will expand the way you use your folders. So enjoy. It might be a little too busy to do the whole thing. So what we might want to do is just do a piece of it. So obviously, you could just cut a strip, and like a 2-inch strip, like I did with the greenery embossing folder here, and run that through your embossing folder and the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, and then you have a thin strip there, which you can then layer onto your card. In this case, I'm doing some white on white, and sometimes adding just a little layer of color, a little thin border there. And then going on my card base, keeping a nice white clean look. But then you are going to get those seams. You can pop it up with dimensionals to give it a little more dimension, but sometimes you might just want kind of a smooth look all in the one layer, not have to do another layer or see those edges. You can do a partial embossing. So it will actually come out, well, getting back to the hammered metal, it would actually come out looking more like this, where it's just all the same layer, but you only have embossed part of it. And I'm going to show you how to do that today, and I have a few different examples. As usual, I show like a theme and variations, I like to call it, getting back to my musical roots. Okay, so I take piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to show you how on the hammered metal. This one I did a wide band. I'm going to show you how to do it a little bit smaller band, but it all works pretty much the same way. You can experiment how much you want there. So if I take my folder, I'm going to put my cardstock in there, and I want the embossing to come just in a little strip here. Obviously, if I run it through, those rollers are going to go through the whole thing, and that's not what I want. So I only want this piece. So I'm going to actually turn it sideways. Normally, when you're running an embossing folder, you want to put the fold in first because the pressure will kind of push out this way, and you want an open end so that it doesn't crack. If you went the other way, there'd be a lot of pressure this way, and eventually that fold would crack. But if we put it sideways, there still is an open end over here, and it's not going to do too much. It's not going to do damage to your folder. But typically, if you can, always put the fold hinged part in first. Okay, so this is a 3D embossing folder. So on the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, it tells you right here which plates to use. So I'm going to, on this one, on all the machines, you have a different sandwich, they call it. So on this one, I need plate number 1, which is this thick one, and then plate number 4 only, because it's a little thicker than just the plain embossing folders. Okay, so I'm going to put it sideways, and I'm going to place my plate in a way that leaves this part with no pressure. So if there's no extra pressure from the top plate on here, it's not going to emboss. So I'm going to just put it about where I want my embossing to start. And obviously then I'm not going to crank all the way through, because then all of this is going to be embossed. So I'm just going to do a few cranks and estimate about how much I want there. So maybe this one I might have done maybe 2.5 cranks. You kind of have to play around with it. You can do fewer and then carefully go in there and check and see if you need to do more. But so I'm going to just leave a little bit here that I don't want embossed. And obviously I'm going to have to hold on to those plates all together, and I'm going to feed them in without moving until my top plate kind of meets the crank. You see how I could tell because the handle is moving? So I've met where those rollers begin, and now I'm going to just hold that and then start cranking it through. So I'm going to do maybe 1.5 turns. All right, and let's just see how that comes out. All right, so if I want to just hold it in place and just peek in there a little bit, I'll hold that without moving it if I want to do a little bit more. Okay, so that's kind of neat. See, I did 1.5 cranks, and I have just a little band of embossing there. It kind of fades into the rest of the card, which is kind of a neat effect. Okay, so I'm going to show you that same technique with some different cards and how I embellish the card itself. This one, I used the brick and mortar embossing folder here, and it came out looking like this. Let me catch the light the right way. It's a little easier to see in person, but if I move it, you might be able to tell. All right, so it's just right in the middle, and the brick sort of fades away there a little bit. I stamped some strawberries in the sweet strawberry, the little topper. This is a 2-step stamping, and one of the little flowers over here. And I glued those all together. And on the back, put some dimensional. So I'm just going to add that to my card front. I stamped hello from that same set. Hello there. In I white embossed it on some basic gray cardstock. So then all I need to do is add this to my card front, and you have a nice clean and simple looking card. So I'm just going to pull those dimensionals off. I made sure to support even the little pieces because I don't want them hanging or getting pulled off somehow. So use the ends of your dimensionals. Don't throw those away. Just cut those and use them for your little pieces. Don't want to waste anything. Okay, those are all done. All right, so because these are all already glued together the way I want them, I can just add that onto there. And you have a nice clean and simple looking card with that subtle background of the embossing. It's not covering the whole card. It gives a little bit more interest, I think. All right, so that's one. Oh, I punched out the strawberries with the strawberry builder punch too. So once you stamp, you can punch out the pieces here, and you don't have to fussy cut. So that's a great bundle that's in the annual catalog. Okay, the next one I did was the Evening Evergreen. I'm not the evening. I used Evening Evergreen as a color, and I used the Evergreen Forest embossing folder. And this is also a 3D folder. This one comes in 6x6. So that you can orient your card in different ways. So if you want a tall card, you would do it this way. If you want a wide card, you would do it this way, and you have that flexibility of the 6x6 folder. So obviously this only works with a big machine, and it has different intensities of the embossing on here, which is shown in the different colors on the front. Okay, so it really is kind of neat where some trees look like they're more in the foreground. So what I did here was I did 2 different versions. One I just embossed in the white. And this might be, I'll try to get this a little hard to see. Embossed it on white, layered with a very thin piece of black cardstock, tied it in with, literally tied it in with the black gingham ribbon. And I put my sentiment on there from Merry Snowflakes, which is new in the new mini catalog. So may the Happiness of family, the joys of friendship, and the warmth of love surround you this season. So thinking of the trees surrounding you and the winter and, you know, staying warm. So just a very, very clean and simple looking card. If you need a little bit more color, if this is a little too stark for you, then you can take it a step further. I only want a piece of maybe the center. So I'm going to put my plate partway through. And this one happens to work fine because the fold is up at the top, so I don't have to worry about it going in the wrong way. So I'm thinking, okay, someplace I want those trees in the middle to be sort of that focal point. All right, and you have some flexibility as to how high up you want those trees, as long as you're not extending past your paper past the folder here, because it does need to fit. So if you want your trees to go higher up, I know it's a little hard to see the white, but then you can bring your card more this way. If you want to leave a little more space at the top, bring it more to the other end. So I'm going to do that because we're going to put something up there. So I want my embossing to start about here. So that's where I'm placing my plate. I'm going to hold them together so that placement doesn't move. I'm holding both layers and I'm pushing it into my machine until I feel I've hit those rollers and a little resistance. All right, so I'm going to give it, I'm noticing where my handle is, so that's 1, 2. I'm going to do just maybe 2 1/4, 2 and a little more, and then come on back. Like I said, if you peek inside the folder without moving it, you can always go back and do more if you want. I'm just going to hold that there and look in, and yeah, that looks kind of nice, kind of centered. So you can play around what works for you. So now if you want that little bit of extra pop of color, you can take your blending brush and add just a little rub of color on there to highlight those edges of your trees there. So I'm going to just tap this a little bit and rub off a little, just in case it's heavy. You can always take off the heaviest piece and just rub a little bit on here. You can always add more, you can't take it off. Okay, so just rubbing a little bit, it catches those edges. You can add as much or as little as you want, and it will highlight those trees a little bit. All right, and then you can layer it. So let me show you what I did. Let me close this up. I already almost completed one. So here's what I did. Added that little bit of green on there. So it looks sort of like a foggy, misty forest. I thought that was really pretty. Mounted it on Evening Evergreen, and it's the soft succulent tone that I used my blending brush on. So then we can layer that onto our card. First, I'm going to tie a little ribbon around there. This is the Evening Evergreen ribbon. I just tied a bow. I'm going to put a glue dot on the back of that, and it's going to hold my bow in place right where I want it. And then I'm going to wrap the ends around the back of that layer. So I'm going to put that right there on top, and then just wrap the ends around. Looks like a little present, right? Thinking of the holidays coming up. So I'm going to use my Stampin' Seal, it's a nice strong adhesive to hold that ribbon down. Okay, and then we will add that to our card front. I think I'll just glue this down because my sentiment is going to be popped up. I don't like to have too many things popped up on dimensionals. You know, makes it too thick, I think, if you have, you know, 2 different layers. But again, sort of like a clean, simple look. All right, and then my sentiment, I white embossed on Evening Evergreen, and I used the Lovely Labels Pick-a-Punch to give me those fancy edges. So just sliding that in there and then punching it. You do want to make sure that you leave 3/8 of an inch for the end to be cut off. So you want to make sure you have enough on either side before cutting it. You don't want to cut off your words. All right, so I put dimensionals on the back of that, and we're going to pop that up. Of course, if you want to get more fancy, you can add some other bling or, you know, enamel dots, whatever. But if you want just a more of a clean look, this will be it. Okay, so again, just plain, kind of simple, nice white. All right, so that's another option to just leaving it plain and white. Now, this probably looks a lot better in person than it does on the camera, but just two different options of that same idea. Okay, so I'm going to take out the greenery embossing folder. This is a regular embossing folder. It's not 3D, so it doesn't say 3D on the packaging, and you can also tell because it is a little bit more flimsy. So you don't need this big heavy plate. All you need is your lucite plates like you use when you're die cutting. Okay, so I'm going to switch that. Swap that out. So you just need your 2 lucite plates on top of your #1 base. And I'm going to, this one is a thinner folder, so it's a little bit easier to get that just where you want it. But I don't want to go all the way to the end. So I'm going to start it about here. And obviously I need to fit it in this way. So this is why you need the bigger machine for this, because this will fit in the mini machine this way, but obviously not this way. So again, we'll put that plate down, and I want this to be more on this side. So I'm going to place the plate a little lower here and hold all my layers there while I feed it in. Lucite makes it a little easier to see through. Okay, I've met some resistance, so I know I can hold it carefully as I feed it through. And this time I'm just going to do 1, maybe a little bit more turns. I just want a little sliver of that embossing there. Yeah, so like just a little stripe. I know this is more about embossing, but I'm just going to feature one of the celebrations. If you're watching this and it's before the end of September 2021, then it's still celebrations, and you can get the Delicate Dahlias stamp set for orders of $100 or more. Spend $100 and you get this great 2-step stamping set. It is called Distinctive because this part, this is the outline, but the part that fills in looks very much like a real flower. Look at all that shading you get right on the stamp itself, where you don't have to color in and use your Stampin' Blends and make it look more realistic. It's already done for you right on the stamp itself. Okay, and this is one of those stamps where you're going to stamp the outline. I'm going to do this in Highland Heather. I'm going to stamp the outline, and notice I put a little dot on top there, so it kind of shows me how I'm going to line it up with the part that goes in the filler right here. So this way I know if I put this down like this, I'm going to stamp this one in that same direction with the dot on top. Makes it a little bit easier to find where you're going to line it up. So this is the outline piece. I'm going to stamp that here. All right, and then I'll do the filler. Okay, again, that dot I'm keeping to the top of my block, and I could see these 2 petals will line up there. And there we go. I might have been off a little bit, didn't want to get my head in the camera. But so that's the idea there. And look how realistic those shadings of those petals are. Okay, and then same idea with the leaves. You will want to stamp 2 leaves. So on here, the new way Stampin' Up is using the cases is you put your clear stamps anyway right onto the case, and I just keep it covered with the little acetate so that they don't kind of stick to each other. So your outlines are on one side, the fillers are on the other, and you have a few nice sentiments to go in there too. Okay, so we're going to do that again in Soft Succulent. I just love this green. It's so soft. It's really nice. It's a nice green, sort of a powdery look to it. So I'll just stamp a couple here, and then you fill them in. And unfortunately, there are no dies for this set, but I did fussy cut. All right, and then we're also going to put, our sentiment will be thanks from Artistically Inked. I want a nice big bold thanks on this. So I'm going to stamp that in black. Getting crowded here on my stamp table. And yep, looks good. Okay, so those are the pieces I will be fussy cutting out. And just to show you a little bit of a good way to fussy cut, if you haven't done that before, actually fussy cutting means you have to do it by hand, be fussy and get in and out, all the little things. Some people find it soothing or relaxing. I do. So hold your scissors still and just kind of steer your paper as you go around. You will want to leave a little bit of a border. Usually, if you do want to go right up close to the line, you have to be really careful to not cut off your image, or to be consistent with getting very close right on that line and not leaving any white space, because otherwise then it will look sloppy. Ta-da! So we'll need 2 sets of leaves, and there's my thanks. Same thing with the thanks. I left some white space around there, and I followed a little bit of the curve of the letters so that it didn't look too chopped or too angular. Good to keep a curve, especially when you're working with a script like this. Okay, so now we can put our card all together. We have our strip of the embossing, and this one I'm going to do as a horizontal card. So I'm just going to glue that down. And then I'm going to arrange my flower. Like I said, I like to kind of glue these together first and then put my dimensionals on, kind of figure out how I want it to be. I don't want to cover too much of that pretty embossing that I did, so I might put the leaves on top and then just kind of add the thanks. So maybe I'll bring this down a little bit and then put my thanks on there. I kind of like the thanks overlapping the flower a little too. So like I said, you get to play around with that. For some reason I like it on top. Maybe there's a little bit more room up there. So I'm going to see where I want these leaves and just kind of glue those together. Maybe one on top, one below. And you get to play around with it a little bit first. All right, let's try that. Okay, so I'm going to put my glue on the flower because I know that won't be seen. I don't want to make a mistake and put too much glue on the leaf where it will be seen. I'll put a little there, arrange the leaf, and again, kind of get an idea where I want this to be. All right, so I'm going to put some dimensionals on that real quick. And I'm using my scraps I have here. Okay, so I'll put that there. Now, because I want this to bridge over the flower a little bit, obviously I'm not going to put dimensionals here, but I am going to put it under the second part of the word, and this part I'm just going to glue down onto the flower. And now they're all the same height. Okay, so is that pretty? We have that nice strip of embossing there. So here's one that I did in polished pink, and I did it in a vertical. So you have two different designs there. So let's try one more with the Seashells 3D embossing folder. This coordinates with the stamp set. Friends are like seashells. We're going to try our technique that we learned today for embossing just a piece of that. We'll call it partial embossing. So I'm looking at my image here, and I'm not sure how well you can see that, but there's a big nautilus shell here, and there's a whelk shell over there. I'm going to try to grab that whelk shell and part of the nautilus. It might be wide to get the whole thing, but I do want the part that comes up and part of the spiral. So I'm seeing right here, this is where that's going to be. So maybe move it over a little bit more. And because it's a 3D embossing folder, I need to use my number 4 plate and my number 1 plate. So I'm going to turn this way and get an idea how far I have to go. About halfway through that embossing folder, but I'm not going to be able to see that with my big plate here. But I do want to emboss from here, so I'm going to lay this there. I'm going to hold on to all those layers as I feed it through the machine, keeping it just where I want it. And now I've hit that resistance of the rollers. I'm going to try to get an idea of how far into that embossing folder. I can see a little bit on the side here. Okay, now I'm going to come back. There's about a little more than 2 turns. I'm holding it in place in case I want to make any other adjustments. Sneaking my finger inside so that I'm not moving that. And look, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I was looking for. So we're going to add some color to this now. I have So Saffron, Calypso Coral, Coastal Cabana, and Pear Pizzazz. So I'm going to use my blending brushes, which I've just added these little clips on here. I found those online. Gives me a quick view as to what colors are which. So like we did before, we're going to just test our brush, make sure we don't have a ton of ink on there so that we can brush more lightly. Okay, so I think that looks really cool. If we layer that onto Calypso Coral, add that to our card base. So let me go get something for there. Okay, so I've chosen this Crumb Cake Baker's Twine that comes in an essentials pack of 5 different neutral colors: black, white, granite, a lot of neutral colors, and this crumb cake. I thought that brought in a more natural element to the card. And I'm basically just wrapping it around, and I'm going to tie it here. But first I want to attach my sentiment because I want it hanging from this little twine here. So I picked something from Many Messages, the stamp set that has all these messages on there, and comes with one big die to cut them all out. This is one stamp. I know I've shown this before in other tutorials. It's one stamp, and then with one die you get to cut out all those labels. And what I do is I keep a store of them in a little bin in white and vanilla. And you can do other colors as well, of course. And so I chose this tiny one because I didn't want to take away too much from our beautiful focal point here of that partial embossed look there with the folders. So I want this hanging from my twine. So I took my pick tool and a foam mat that comes with the brush tool with the take your pick tool. I'm going to poke a little hole right in the top there. Okay, so I'm going to arrange that where I want it to end up. It's kind of in the middle of my twine, and then I'm going to be able to wrap the ends around and tie it here. There we go. I can slide this over a little bit. Use my fabric scissors to cut that. I don't want it too short. I want it kind of hanging. And I will put a glue dot under there. Again, using my take your pick tool, I will pick up one of those glue dots and Get it right under there. Or you could put a dimensional dot, that works too. Okay. All right, that should do it. Let's add that to our card base. And we have a very soft looking nautical card. Okay, pretty, right? So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you try some of your own. And if you do, please share them with me. I'd love to see your own creations. You can post them on my Facebook page. Just look for stampwithlorraine.com. And you can post to my blog. You can look for more information on my blog. And I hope to hear from you soon. Have fun.